Let's look at some of the examples from previous rounds and see how the concepts we've learned have been applied. Here we have a rain garden surrounded by a lawn alternative. You'll notice the rain garden basin in the red line zone. You'll see that depression there if you look to the picture on the left. On the picture on the right, you can see where the downspout is being directed into that rain garden on the other side of those rocks with the red circle. And you'll also notice that the sprinkler system is going. This is a good time to just reiterate that that low and no maintenance kind of concept does come after those plants are established. So those first 1 to 3 years, we are still going to be watering those plants to make sure that they do well and survive. Here we have a before and after lawn alternative. So you can see pre and post planting. Here is another rain garden example. So we're looking at that front section on the left. I believe most of that other area was already established. And this project looked at the remaining area that you can see from the overhead shot on the right to place a small rain garden basin. So you can see that depression there, and that water will collect in that basin. And once again, we have that example from the technical video, another angle of that rain garden, again with the overflow spillway into that bioswale, which takes water out once that rain garden fills up. Here we have a pretty creative rain barrel project. Someone using a garage or shed, and they put about 10 rain barrels, which fill one after the other until the entire system is full. And here are more photos of that project. You'll see on the left they've even got some gauges to kind of show them where they are in the progression of those filling up. And we've got another rain garden example. I like this photo because you can see really clearly on that left hand side of each picture that berm on the back side that's going to keep water in that basin and allow it to collect and fill up before being soaked into the ground. Here's a permeable paver project with some native plants surrounding that. So just a simple permeable paver project with lawn alternative. One note, permeable pavers do not have to replace asphalt or non-permeable pavers. We will allow them to replace grass. Just another view of that project, and another note that projects can be pretty simple and don't have to be super complex. Here's a nice progressive time lapse of a DIY lawn alternative. So just replacing that turf in the front yard. You can see that this was a do-it-yourself project that I think turned out pretty nicely. And one more shot of that project once completed. Here's another innovative solution to rainwater harvesting. So this individual sourced a custom-built stormwater pillow. So this sits under this individual's deck and fills up with stormwater up to, I believe it was 2,000 gallons. And then they hooked a motor to the other end so that they could do all the irrigation necessary for their existing plant installation. So we talked a bit about no re-landscaping of existing landscaping features. This landowner had maxed out their landscaping capacity, so they utilized the grant for irrigating all of that landscaping. This is another creative rain garden solution. They have sort of a tiered approach in the backyard that leads to some reuse of existing infrastructure for a rain garden basin in the next slide. Here we've got that rain garden basin example. I'm not really sure what to call this area alongside the staircase, but they were able to construct it so that it would capture some stormwater. You can see in that right hand side, they've got a little notch for the overflow there for when it does fill up. Here's another before and after rain garden progression. This would be a good time to just throw out the disclaimer that we have a lot of photos of recently installed projects, and this is from that point in which landowners are asked to send in their finished projects during that completion packet stage. We don't get a ton of photos after the fact, so we always do love to get those established photos a few years after the project goes in the ground. So just a reminder to keep sending us those photos. But here we have a old parking pad, and that was excavated. And here we can see the digging of the basin, and then the piping and planting going in. So a note about percolation tests, obviously creating a percolation test situation where the parking pad would be impossible. So we're going to go for, the next best area and just pick the closest spot we can and do a percolation test there. And that's how you're going to go through that process if you're trying to put a rain garden somewhere where there may have been concrete or brick or something like that. Here's another rain barrel example. These are very large rain barrels. I believe they're 500 to 1,000 gallons each, much larger than the 50 to 200 gallon variety that we typically see in our program. But these photos do a really good job of showing the input and overflow of the rain barrel. Especially on the photo on the right, you can see the pipe entering the top of the rain barrel is bringing water into that rain barrel. And once that water fills it up, which it will, even with a rain barrel this large, it exits the pipe on the front of the rain barrel through that piping. So this is the overflow situation that we were talking about in the technical video. Additionally, these photos show that they've lifted these rain barrels onto concrete blocks. So this is going to support the weight of the rain barrel, and it also lifts it off the ground. So you'll see the spigot at the bottom of each of those rain barrels. It might be hard to get a picture or anything under that spigot if it's not raised. So also something to consider when you're designing your rain barrel projects. Here's another DIY lawn alternative. So just taking a section of turf and inputting native plants. Here's another front yard lawn alternative example. And previously I mentioned not having great establishment photos. We actually do of this one. So stick around and see that photo in a few slides. Here is another angle of the previous example. Again, this is a front yard lawn alternative. And one more angle here, getting that overhead view. And finally, here's that project 1 year later, showing an established lawn alternative. And this project really looks great. Really happy with this one. And one more angle of that lawn alternative project. Here we actually have some turf next to the lawn alternative. So it kind of calls back to that example we had of the switchgrass and the turf from the City Garden Park, and kind of giving you that juxtaposition of what's happening in each area of the picture from a stormwater and absorption perspective. And finally, we have that first example of the rain garden with the surrounding lawn alternative. And you can see those original pictures on the left. And then on the right side, we have that establishment photo, which really shows how nicely that project filled in. It shows that project, part of it in bloom at one point. And in that bottom photo, we can see that basin full of water. So really good photos here to give you a sense of what your project could potentially look like if it does well in that establishment phase and you take good care of it and have a good project.